So we're back for our month, actually probably been over a month this time, but anyway, I'm back again. Here's a new video. I've got some stuff to put on the car. So for those of you with a keen eye or attention to detail, might have noticed on my last video that the caliper on the passenger side of the car doesn't match the driver's side of the car. That is because I have an 850 BMW 850i, so E34, early single piston front caliper on the driver's side, and on the passenger side I have a regular 525 caliper and rotor. And the reason being is because the bleeder screw broke off in my passenger side caliper, and then after breaking a extractor off inside of the center of it, I kind of gave up. And it took me forever to source the passenger side front caliper that I have in my hand here. I was supposed to have this during my last video, and I was going to hopefully do both parts at the same time. So this caliper, it came from England. So after waiting a few weeks for it to actually come in, the same day that I filmed the last video, when I was ready to install everything, opened the box, and the part number on the outside of the box is correct, but the caliper that was inside of the box was for some sort of Ford that we don't even get in Canada. It's a European market Ford, and I was like, hey guys, wrong caliper in the box. So finally today this one came in, and it is the correct one. It did get a little bit beat up in shipping. The box was like paper mache by the time it got to me, but luckily this is cast iron. It held up pretty well. The bleeder screw is bent, which kind of, you know, scared me a bit, but it's moving freely. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the bleeder screw from the 525 caliper. For now I'm going to be running it like this, so it'll be whatever this silver coating is on passenger side and a red caliper on the driver's side. Part number 2 here. So what this is the, well, I don't really know how to say the brand. This is their card. Don't think it's going to focus. Yeah, there you go. I thought it was Mausberry, but there's a little mouse as the logo, so maybe it's Mausberry. Anyways, Mausberry Circuits develops this little piece, and what that's for is my Raspberry PiDash that I made, which some of you may have seen in my previous videos. So this is my dash that I get all the gauges and stuff out of my Megasquirt ECU. What that circuit does is shuts this down properly. The thing with Raspberry Pis is they're effectively like almost like a desktop computer, and without having a power button wired to it, turning it off by unplugging the power, you can corrupt the operating system, and then this won't boot anymore, which I'd like this to be reliable so that when I turn it off, I'm not affecting it. So the way I had it connected previously was I had it effectively plugged into like the lighter socket of my car, and what was great is with ignition turning on, it would power the socket, and that would then turn this on nicely. But turning off the car just cuts power, and that's just like going to your desktop computer and ripping it right out of the wall. Not a good idea. This nifty little circuit, which is actually really small, that does everything that I need it to do, sends a command to the tablet or to the Raspberry Pi to turn it off properly. And the way that it works is you can set the script on here, the shutdown script, to have this turn off after a certain duration of time. I don't know what the default is. I think it might be somewhat immediate, that it tells this to turn off properly, and then once the tablet or the dash is turned off, it will then cut power to the circuit. You can set the timer to whatever you'd like. So if I want this to turn off 5 minutes after I turn off the car, it can do that for me. So super convenient. Take it out, takes about, let's say, 3 minutes to get gas, hop back in the car, tablet's still on, and as soon as it gets accessory power back into it, it stops running that script to properly shut down the device. So I jacked up the car, which I didn't bother filming. It takes a super long time in the garage with such big space, as you can see. I barely fit here with an impact. It's gonna be fun. So here's my old caliper. I just need to take the carrier, put it on that. So right here I have an adapter coming from my braided brake line that comes off the master, the long ones that I showed earlier on in one of my previous videos. I believe they're -3, which then get adapted to the proper BMW brake line fitting. I don't really remember what it's called. I want to do this quickly so I don't lose too much brake fluid. Line out. Have this simple little tool here. It's like $10 at your local parts place, maybe less because Canadian dollars versus US dollars is very different, so it's probably like $2, $3, $4 for American folks. So anyways, this line attaches, the way I do it is I just, since the bleed screws are small on these, I'm able to just slip it over the bleed screw. So let me do that now. Nice and snug. And then the cap right here has a one-way valve. So when you start pressing the pedal, after you crack the bleeder screw, start pressing the pedal, it's gonna fill the reservoir with fluid, but it's not gonna let air come back. So then it's got a little magnet here. The magnet can either stick onto the rotor or stick onto anywhere else that's metal. And I will go press the pedal and hopefully see the reservoir start to fill up. All right, so it's day 2. I decided to make it a 2-part video because my light died. And I couldn't find the plug for it, so without trying to film a black hole down here, I decided to just wait till today. What we're going to be doing today is installing the little Mausberry adapter. And what's going to help make that a bit easier is a tool that I just recently got here, which is a power probe. The same job can be done with a multimeter or a test light. It's effectively like a glorified test light. So the way that you use this is you have this super long lead, which is super nifty because you can plug this in anywhere and be able to get all the way around your car. So what you do is you connect it to your battery, either with the included alligator clips here, this adapter here. So this is just effectively the same thing, but it goes through the lighter socket in your car, or accessory power socket, whatever you want to call it. With this, what you can do with the switch is pressing it up, you can actually send 12 volts through the tip of the probe and activate something. So if you wanted to test, let's say, a relay or test a circuit that gets activated with 12 volt power, you can just press that at the end of the circuit and then activate the item. So for example, let's say like a starter, if you want to know if a circuit is powered or is completed to ground. So for example, like my fan circuit on my car, my electric fan, that relay, once it gets connected to ground, completes the circuit. So what you can do with that instead is go to that same ground pin, and then you can press the second position here on the switch, and that will ground the circuit. Another thing you can do too, I think anyways, so I'm still getting to know this this tool, but you have this other alligator clip here, this lead, and I'm pretty sure this is used to test resistance between different things. So you can put this on one end of a circuit or a resistor itself, put the needle on the other end and test the resistance of it. So yeah, that's the long-winded explanation of the power probe. Has a screen here which is going to tell me information, and it also beeps depending whether you found ground or you found power. So we will get into that. So this is the device when it's powered up. So for today I'm going to be using just the DC voltage. Yeah, so let's bring you guys a bit closer and have a look. So I've already gone through and probed around, so I'm pretty sure I know where I want to piggyback off of here. So there's a connector here with some decent gauge leads going to it. Trying to get the camera at a good angle here to record it, but also not be in the way of it. That's the screen here. And so on this connector right up here, we've got a red wire, and I can just get behind it. And it's difficult to see, but the screen is now red. It's beeping at me, and it was registering 12 volts from here, and that's with the car off. So we know that that is a constant power. Now, moving over to the wire beside it, which is green. So now the screen's lighting up green. It's showing me that that's currently ground. Now, if we put the key in accessory and probe that same green wire, it's now registering 12 volts. So we know that that green wire beside the red wire is accessory power. Bolt right here going into the chassis, which is pretty big, and I'm going to use that as a dedicated ground for the circuit and just try to nicely tie everything together. Really wondering why I'm not piggybacking off of the head unit power, because behind there are many leads. So it's simple to find: switched power, constant power, and ground. But I really don't like taking out the center console on this car, and I did it recently to change some things, and I don't want to do it again. And another reason being is because eventually, so I usually have my my digital dash right here, which is going to stay there for a little while. But eventually, once I figure out a couple more things, I'd like to end up replacing my cluster with it. So eventually it will be going up here, maybe, we'll see. And so having the wiring coming from here, I'm going to have it long enough to reach where the radio is, but that means that it'll also reach up here when the time comes. So now the best course of action will be to unplug the battery from the car, just to make sure that I don't get shocked or short anything out, and then start wiring in the circuit. Got a couple more things here. I've got some spools of wire. So we've got red, yellow, and brown. And then got these wire strippers. I really like this style of wire stripper, especially for the use case that we're doing today, because I'm going to be piggybacking off of these wires. If I just want to reveal a little bit of wiring and just split a small part of the insulation, these come in handy for that. Then I've got this box of assorted different sizes of heat shrink tubing, and I would probably use this style of heat shrink. So these here are super cool little heat shrink tubes, and they have solder in the middle of them. So when you heat them up with a lighter, they will shrink and the solder will melt, and it makes it super convenient. Let's get to it. So that's what I like about these, is just sliding the wire in between and separating it ever so slightly and revealing some of the wire inside of the insulation. So hopefully that was easy to see, but if not, I will redo that again on one of the other wires. So. Alright, so got my soldering iron warmed up here. Go. So, accessory wire is pretty much good to go. Just gonna get some electrical tape and wrap that around. Alright, so I went ahead and finished soldering the other one, because it's a wash, rinse, and repeat of the same thing, and I don't want to be too repetitive here. So now that the two positive leads are dealt with, let's just confirm that they are doing what they are supposed to do. So, don't know if that picks up very well on camera, but that is reading positive, and the yellow wire is not until the key is on ignition, and it is now reading. So we've got our switched power, we've got our constant power. So now we just need to do our ground. What I'm going to be using for the ground is one of these eyelets, and that's because it's going to be going onto a bolted area here. And what I prefer to do with these is, rather than use them as a crimp and crimp the end here, I get rid of the little insulated part here. Usually just like twist it off. So now that that's off, I will feed my stripped end of the ground into it. There we go. So now we have the wire soldered in, and I'm going to throw a little bit of heat shrink on there just to really seal the deal. What's convenient about this whole area here is it's a perfectly clean area, so I don't have to worry about scraping off any paint or anything because it's already good to go. And just to make sure, so we've got confirmation this is a good ground. So now I'm just confirming the pinouts, because we have the regular power inputs here and ground, and then we have some pins here, and what these are for are these actually tell the Raspberry Pi to proceed the shutdown command smoothly. And on the website for Mausberry, he's got a pretty thorough instructions here. So GPIO pin 23 goes to the in, which is labeled here, and conveniently he has a chart here on the side which labels all the GPIOs, which are the ins and outs on the Raspberry Pi. So what I do is I just count. So on the right hand side you've got pin 23 and 24, which are side by side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8, which I have as this blue one here, this is going to go to the out. So connect out lead to GPIO 23. So we're going to connect that out. And then 24, which is the pin right next to it, goes to the in. Okay, so here's the short USB-C cable. And the reason I opted for such a short one is because I'm going to likely, for now anyways, until I design something better, I'm going to double-sided tape the unit to the back of the screen, and then this USB-C, this little guy here, will go right into the USB-C of the Raspberry Pi 4th gen, which I have here. So for now, this is a very crude setup. So one thing I've done as well here is I've gone ahead and added some solder to the end of each of these wires. I'm pretty sure that process is called tinning, and what it helps with is keep the wires from getting frayed over time, and yeah, makes it almost just like a pin. Okay, so I've got everything connected here now. The last thing is just to plug in the USB-C. Terrible example here, but you can still kind of see the screen. I also taped off the back of the circuit here so that nothing shorts out. And now, when I put the car into the on position, we've got power going to the unit. So the boot up time of the Raspberry Pi isn't super fast. It can probably be optimized a little bit better. But that's why it'd be nice to have the shutdown set on a timer so you don't have to wait for this to boot up every time you get back in your car if you're just getting out for a couple of minutes. And the Raspberry Pi does not take up a lot of power, so leaving it on isn't going to drain your battery if it's on for even 10, 20 minutes or so. So now the Raspberry Pi is on, so the moment of truth here is when I turn the key off, it is supposed to shut this down slowly. There. So now the key is completely off and out of the car, and the Raspberry Pi is still on. So I don't know what the default timer is on the circuit here to tell the Raspberry Pi to turn off. It's still on, so let's see if it starts to turn off soon. What up? It's a new day here in my office, and I have everything set up here, kind of like a bench setup going on. So I've got a computer power supply here, supplying 12 volts, just like a car battery would. Got my Raspberry Pi and the car switch here. Using the breadboard just to keep wires from touching each other. Makes it a little bit easier. Now I finally have everything working. I was missing a part of the script that tells the switch how to turn down. So I'm just going to take my 12 volt constant here. Sorry, this is mimicking my accessory, so this would be like turning the key on. So if I touch and hold it here to the 12 volt constant, we'll see the Raspberry Pi turning on. Alright, so there it is, turning on and automatically booting to Tuner Studio, which is what I use to access the Megasquirt. And now if I remove the accessory, so this would be like turning the key off, it's turning down the Raspberry Pi.